When many of us think about the environment, we imagine activists promoting the use of reusable products, recycling bins, or even electric cars. However, before addressing environmental issues, we must take a closer look at where they stem from. A large majority of the world's waste isn't coming from the United States. In fact, most of the plastic waste on Earth actually comes from third world countries. To many, this may be surprising, but we must consider the reality of what is occurring around the globe. Poorer countries in the developing world often have not developed adequate waste management policies or systems, trash collection services, or government institutions to properly manage their waste. Oftentimes, garbage is not even collected on a regular basis. Additionally, lack of funds prevents municipalities in such countries from ever being able to create a proper waste management system. Not to mention, many of these countries are dealing with more pressing social concerns, such as war, lack of clean water, or major economical and political issues. However, developed countries do not lack blame. The United States is a large contributor to plastic waste in developing nations.
To see how waste management in developed countries impacts developing countries, we have to look at the global recycling chain. This chain begins when developed countries either recycle their materials, dispose of them properly, or sell them to other countries. They sell them either to developed countries that engage in industrial recycling or to developing nations who don't. These developing nations are already struggling, with 45% of them lacking proper sanitation infrastructure, and 90% of that 45% are already openly dumping their waste or burning it. And of the waste that actually makes it to these sanitation buildings, most of it ends up in the ocean regardless because of the poor maintenance of these buildings and their location on rivers and coastlines. The selling of waste to third world countries leads to the industry of scavenging, which is when people pick through waste by hand looking for recyclables. Most of these workers are women, children, and the elderly, and they encounter hazardous materials, broken glass, and infectious needles. Beyond that, women who engage with toxic chemicals are at a higher risk of cancer and of miscarriages. Additional risks include higher crime rates due to the fact that the location of jobs are on the outskirts of cities, higher morbidity rates, and a shorter life expectancy. Beyond this, there are middlemen who exploit these workers by massively underpaying them or using them for political gain. The social effects are not lost on these workers, with most people stereotyping them as dirty, gross, or criminal due to the nature of their job. Beyond this, over 3 million girls every year don't go to school because they have to be scavengers to support their family. Scavenging is a major issue in this global recycling pandemic. Other ways that we address the global issue of recycling are talked about next.
Plastic pollution in the ocean has received little attention in terms of international environmental agreements, especially in comparison to things like carbon emissions and pesticides. The U.S. National Academy of Sciences says that from the perspective of global policy, international plastic pollution agreements are now where climate change agreements were in 1992. Most global attempts to minimize plastic entering the ocean have unfortunately been voluntary and lacked defined reduction goals, methods of monitoring progress, and signatories from UN member states. In 2011, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, in conjunction with the United Nations Environment Program, introduced the Honolulu Strategy, which was a planning tool to reduce plastic pollution and its impacts. In 2012, a voluntary commitment to significantly reduce marine debris by 2025 was announced at the UN Conference on Sustainable Development. Similarly, in 2017, the UNEP unveiled the Clean Seas campaign, which asked individuals, industries, and member states to voluntarily commit to an action of their choice to reduce plastic pollution. As a note, the EPA spotlights 6 Asian nations as the main sources of ocean pollution, but they fail to mention that these are areas where the U.S. exports our own plastic waste so that we don't have to manage it ourselves.
Developing countries are not completely to blame. Millions of humanitarians work in these countries to provide them with aid. This pro-social behavior results in donations and going to undesirable or dangerous places to help people. Humanitarians can be more concerned with the health of people than the environment. According to the Geneva Environment Network, single-use plastic is used for relief items, construction, medical items and pharmaceuticals, agroplastics, IT and telecom, as well as electrical equipment. Paul Harvey, researcher of environmental science at Macquarie University, notes that single-use plastic is currently needed to control infection, prevent contamination, ensure food and water safety, store without refrigeration, pack more resources, dispose of harmful waste from research, and aid those with disabilities. The strength and resilience of single-use plastic is detrimental to the environment, but it can be necessary for these situations in which there is not a safe alternative. Therefore, there is a great need for single-use plastics with less of an environmental impact when thrown out. Another solution would be creating more biodegradable single-use products. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the UN Environment Program made many goals with the medical and humanitarian emergency phase. One such goal was, quote, ensuring that contaminated municipal and medical waste is managed and disposed of in an environmentally sound manner.
Many developing nations that contribute the most to plastic pollution in oceans are poverty-ridden. Plastic is cheap to produce and more affordable than environmentally friendly or sustainable materials for these populations. A focus was to be placed on not only establishing proper disposal centers, but on incentivizing people to actually bring their used plastics to them, such as through compensation. It might have a greater effect. Think of the concept of bottle returns. People bring their used cans and bottles to make money back. Zoning in on developing and highly impoverished nations and building plants that pay per pound of plastic brought in will likely motivate poorer populations to not only stop contributing to plastic pollution, but actually clean their environments for the chance to earn more financial support.